The next style we'll talk about that was developed after 1945 is minimalism. Minimalism is a type of music that was written by many composers in this period, especially by the composers John Adams and Philip Glass. Minimalism was developed by composers that did not appreciate or like chance and serialistic music. They wanted something in between, something that was not too controlled and something that was not too random. Minimalist composers also wanted to emphasize how to listen to music, not how the composition was put together. They cared about what their audience thought and whether they were enjoying the music they were listening to, and were able to learn something slowly about that music and how to listen to it. Minimalism, therefore, is a style of music that has a steady, repetitive pulse, clear tonality, and short melodic fragments. The music sounds as though it is repeating continuously with only minimal changes. Dynamics, texture, and harmony are constant over time in minimalist music, with only minimal or gradual changes occurring. Composers that were minimalistic really wanted audiences to hear the simplicity of the music while being able to follow its flowing form. The first and best minimalist composer is Philip Glass. He was born in 1937 and is an American composer. He's not discussed in detail in your book, but I felt that he is very important to knowing about minimalism as a style, and so included him here and a listening example of his music. He writes music that, in his own word, has repetitive structures, rather than calling himself a minimalist. But at its essence, his music is minimalist, and in the beginning of his career, he considered himself a creator of minimalist music. Philip Glass has written tons of music, quite literally tons of it, and most of it is minimalist in nature, or has been built from minimalist ideas. His most well-known music outside the classical world are his film scores. He's written tons of film scores for darker movies such as Secret Window, The Watchmen, Dracula, many others that you have heard of and some that you haven't from the 1980s and 90s. He's won Grammys, and he's been up for Tony Awards as well as Academy Awards. He's written music for all different levels of visual, film, stage, anything you can think of, including video games. His music is featured in Grand Theft Auto 4, surprisingly enough. And if you listen to his type of music and really study what it sounds like, you're going to begin to hear it more and more often as you watch films and play video games, because his music is used very often in such settings. His music is quite captivating because it is minimalist in nature, because it allows the listener to slowly progress with the music. There's no set meaning for the piece. There's simply an idea of discovery and longevity to the music. Metamorphosis is one of his more famous works that was not written originally as a film score. It's a large piano piece that has a set of short movements amongst it, all of the movements being labeled Metamorphosis 1, Metamorphosis 2, etc., etc. It's not a listening example from the book, as I said before, but it's a great example of minimalism, so I am making it required listening. I want you to try and understand what minimalism is by listening to the very best of minimalist composers. Listen to at least 10 minutes of the longer composition. It doesn't matter where you start, beginning, middle, or end, and it doesn't really matter how much you listen to. Feel free to listen to the whole thing, because this music changes very slowly. When you're listening to it, try to see whether you can feel the changes in harmony and the melodic line. What's most important to the music? Rhythm, tone color, melody, harmony? When and how does it change? Do you like music like this? Can you close your eyes and imagine any scenes from a movie where this might be great music to use? Minimalism is a fantastic new type of music that's used in many different ways. And at its most basic sense is, of course, minimal. But that minimalism really makes us respond to it in a nice way, since it allows us the time to enjoy the music and learn about it while we're listening to it. John Adams is another minimalist composer. He was born a little later than Philip Glass in 1947. John Adams was influenced by the music of the classical period as well as the more popular styles of the new 20th century and jazz. He was influenced by music of the past and present, in other words. Eventually, John Adams won a Pulitzer Prize in music. He conducts music. He's worked with the San Francisco Symphony and the LA Philharmonic. He's also worked at some of the greatest and most prestigious universities and conservatories of music. His music is minimalist, but also incorporates elements of the Romantic, including big orchestras and beautiful melodies. He has written in other styles, and he does write for other types of groupings or orchestrations, but he's most famous for his orchestral works and his operas that are minimalist. Just try and imagine a 3-hour opera that's entirely minimalist, but there's something very captivating about the slow pace of the music and how interesting and rhythmic the music is. Remember that minimalist music has a steady pulse that drives the music forward and changes the harmony very slowly. Your second listening example is a John Adams piece called The Short Ride in a Fast Machine. The listing outline and the description of the piece are on page 351 in your text. This is a pretty typical minimalist piece by John Adams. It incorporates faster changes and lots of exciting sounds that some minimalist music has, but it still centers around the repetitive rhythms and a fast and steady tempo and repeated melodic fragments. In other words, John Adams in this piece has taken minimalism and tried to make it more exciting than usual because he's upped the tempo and also upped the pace of the changes in harmony and sound. But it's still very minimal in the sense that the harmonies do not change that often, that the melody lines don't change that often, that the music itself is not complicated. It's minimal. It has ever-shifting meters and tempos, but the pulse that you see being played by the xylophone player is still always happening at the same rate, and even on the same pitch. Interestingly enough, this is also an example of electronic music because it uses two synthesizers in the large Romantic style orchestra. It's an example of the return to tonality that we see after 1945 because it's in a normal balanced key and there are some melodic there are some real melodies in the music and aspects of melodicism. And it's also percussion music because it uses so many different percussion music instruments in so many ways. Short Ride in a Fast Machine was written as an orchestral fanfare that was supposed to create excitement at the start of a show for an audience. I hope you enjoy listening to it.